a special meeting of the Newport City Council and the community residents for the purpose of discussing the events, the ballot initiatives for the vote that will take place tomorrow, August 12th, is called to order at 6:02 p.m. on Monday, August 11th. Present are Councilmember Carter Finnegan, Councilmember John Manette, Council President Kevin Charbonneau, Clerk Treasurer Jim Johnson, Chief of our Fire Department Kevin Lacoste. I think that's everybody who's got an official role tonight, and myself, Rick Ufford Chase. First item on the agenda is any additions or deletions. Council members, any additions? None. Deletions? Jim, you're okay? No. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. This consent agenda, which was put out in the packet on Saturday morning, includes the approval for the minutes for August 4th, our last meeting, AP warrants for the 8th of August, payroll warrants for the 7th of August, and a liquor license, not liquor license, a tobacco permit request for vape and smoke. And I'll just note that we will not be doing a financial review this evening. That'll be on the agenda again for our regular meeting next week. Are there any questions about the consent agenda? Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The motion passes. Here we go. We moved right into our fourth item. The primary purpose of the meeting tonight is to entertain any final questions, comments, concerns from folks in the community about the ballot tomorrow, the ballot initiatives tomorrow. So we have a copy of the FAQ that was approved by the council in July. Carter shared it on the screen. We'll use it primarily so that we can guide the conversation. The intention is to take the articles one by one. We'll read the article and then ask if there are any comments or questions, concerns, anything you'd like Councilor, myself to respond to. And then we'll move from one article to the next. And then before we finish, we'll take any more global concerns about it. So there's an opportunity to do that. But let's do the specifics first on each of the ballot initiatives and then go to the global, okay? So the first one, I'll just read them as we go here. First article reads, shall general obligation bonds or notes of the City of Newport in an amount not to exceed $75,000 be issued to fund, together with other general obligation bonds or notes, in the amount of $800,000 that was previously approved on March 1st, 2022, for the purchase and equipping of a fire truck for the Newport Fire Department, the total cost of which is to be $875,000. That's I'll just say as we start that I actually suspect this will come in slightly under that number, and obviously we would only seek the loan, the bond, to cover the actual amount of that purchase. So are there comments, questions, concerns about item 1, Article 1? Go ahead, Mark.
Why do you still want to take 8,000, 75,000 out when we don't need a fire truck? Because that fire truck is still good.
So I'll just say, as I've said once before when we had this conversation, you and I, that the fire truck was approved in 2022 and ordered shortly thereafter, I believe. So we're taking delivery on a fire truck that has been built for the City of Newport.
You know where it's at.
It's my judgment at this point that we've ordered this, we have no choice but to go through, and that we need, I trust the department and the wisdom of the community back in March of 2022, that we do in fact need it. So the only question tonight and tomorrow is not, do we need a fire truck? It's, are we prepared to seek a loan to cover the additional money above what the residents approved, the voters approved in March of 22.
I live here in Newport. My name is Jean.
Can you stand up so we can all hear?
No.
Okay, just project as much as you can then.
Okay. I would like to find out if
we need this fire truck. Why don't we sell off one that's an older one and sell it?
That's a good question.
And you get more than $75,000 for it, that you can take the money, put towards the new fire truck, plus you'll still have money left in the bank for whatever budgeting reasons you need in the future for the fire department.
Thank you. Chief?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So we are absolutely going to sell a 1998 for our engine one pumper to try to recoup some of the money. Some of the tools, well, matter of fact, most of the tools on that truck will be coming off that truck onto the new truck. So there will be a cost savings once that truck is sold.
And how do you go about selling a fire truck?
So that's
Put an
something,
ad in Craigslist.
Front porch forum.
are you looking for a truck? Why is that?
A yard ornament?
So we have been in contact with the Spartan dealer that's selling us the new truck. He took a bunch of information, mileage, hours, etc., and he will post that for us on an equipment dealer site at no charge.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that satisfies me.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We'll learn more about the fire truck sale in the future.
That answers my question.
Good. Any other questions regarding the first article? Okay, let's move on to the second one. Can you scroll down first?
Also, can people read this okay, or should I zoom in?
If you could zoom in.
Zoom in, I'm carrying that same.
There are copies, hard copies still up there on the table if anybody would like them. That's better. Article 2, this is the language you will see tomorrow on the ballot. Shall a general obligation bond anticipation note for the city of Newport in an amount not to exceed $3 million be issued to refund a $2.4 million construction line of credit at or prior to its maturity in October 2025, and to refund interfund loans from the general fund to the water fund in the aggregate amount of $600,000 to finance additions and improvements being made to the city's water system as approved by the voters in March 2021. So just a summary for those who have not been showing up at all the meetings we've been having about this. The new water tower was approved in March 2021, a little over 4 years ago. It was approved for, help me Ann, $4.985 million minus any grants that we would take in that could help to defray the cost, which ended up totaling roughly $2 million. They included the ARPA funds that the City Council decided to dedicate to this purpose. So what's going on now is that we already have the approval. We're not asking for approval for any additional funds. All we're doing here is asking for approval to arrange for a short-term loan to cover us until we can arrange the long-term bond with what will end up being with the Vermont Bond Bank, which will extend over, I don't know exactly what the terms will be yet, but probably a minimum of 20, could be 30 years to pay for that water tower. And the reason it's necessary is because the charter restricts the ability of the city of Newport to borrow for more than a year for any purpose without having the voters approve it. And we already have borrowed, we haven't hit the max yet, but we have arranged for a $2.4 million line of credit that we took out in October of last year. That will come due, I believe it's on October 6th. And that means in order to extend it to bridge to the anticipated bond income, we need permission from the voters to take a short-term note. So that's, I think that pretty well summarizes it. Anybody have any comments about that from the council? First, hi, Andrew. So are there questions or thoughts or concerns, anything that people want to share about Article 2?
Yeah, and we should just add, I think, that the payment component in terms of paying the interest and then the bond payment has tentatively already been factored into the water rates.
For this coming year?
Yes.
Yes. We tried to make an estimate of what we thought the principal and interest payments would be. once approved for the remainder of the fiscal year, and that's been included in the budget. Hold on, Lori.
I just want to say, as a member of the Finance Committee, the question has been asked, are we asking for another, $3 million? And the fact is we're not, because the city voters have already voted in 2021 for that original money. We get the short term, as Rick said, and then we get the long term that's going to pay back the short term. So we're not asking for an additional amount of money. That seems to be a question.
And it's really just a timing issue because the bond bank, if I understood the explanations, only issues bonds once or twice a year. And so you have to get from October to the next issuance date.
Yes, so we've had some conversation even in the last week with the bond bank. They've given us an indication of what they will need from us in order to put us in the next round for consideration. If we submit the paperwork that's appropriate by, I think it's around the 1st of December, then assuming we're approved, the earliest we would see this would be April or May of next year. If for some reason that doesn't go smoothly, then the next opportunity would be the August pool with the bond bank. So we would seek funding for a year just to make sure that we've covered. We would seek a loan, a short-term loan for a year with no penalty for early payment, assuming that we would get the bond. Any questions? Okay, let's go on to Article 3. Article 3, shall general obligation bonds or notes of the City of Newport in an amount not to exceed $1,800,000 be issued to refund a deficit in the general fund account? So this is a new loan. This is not a loan that's been previously approved by residents, voters of the City of Newport. So what's going on here is that over a period of roughly the last 7 or 8 or 9 years, it's hard to know exactly where it started at this point, the city has spent more than it's had, spent more than it's taken in consistently, to the point now where we have significant deficits in this account and in the sewer fund. The deficit in this account, as of a month ago when these articles were written and approved by City Council, was sitting at $1.8 million. So this would give us permission to borrow up to $1.8 million over a period of somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 years in order to spread the payment of that accumulated deficit out over a period of time instead of spending it all in 1 year. Are there questions about this one? Comments?
And if this were to fail, the alternative, as Chip Stearns described it, is considerably worse because it would involve a forced increase in the tax rate in 1 year to pay the whole thing off, which would be somewhere in the 55 to 60 cent range, if I remember the calculations that Jim penciled
Yeah, I
out
don't
for me.
remember the exact how that calculation works, but
Yeah.
basically that's right. If this doesn't pass, the charter requires that the accumulated deficit be paid off within 1 year.
So this is definitely the least painful path.
Go ahead.
Crystal Santopolo, Newport.
Sorry, can you speak up?
Crystal Santopolo, Newport. It doesn't really feel like we have a choice here. It does not. You're saying that we're voting on this, but it's really not a choice. We either pay a lot now or we agree to pay it over the course of so many years. But we still, like, to my understanding, don't know exactly what went wrong. You guys are investigating it still. So why are we paying it before we know what went wrong and before we know that it's not going to happen again?
It's a great question. The short answer is you're right. I don't think it's not much of a choice. I think the part of the answer is the finance team and therefore council acting on their recommendations have in fact been spending the last 5 months trying to figure out what went wrong. And we have a pretty good idea, in general terms, of where the deficit came from. And we are working now, and we've made decisions already to make sure that we're not continuing to deficit spend. So there's no, the city department heads right now are working with Chip Stearns, our financial consultant, to do a deep dive into the budget that was passed last March by the voters and make sure that there are not glaring deficiencies in that budget. And one way or another, our commitment as a council has been that we will not overspend the income this year. So it won't get any deeper.
Are there alternatives?
Not that we've been able to discern at this point. We really have no choice but to pay it off, because at this point the city has no reserve. All the cash reserve was spent in this process, and therefore there's no reserve to fall back on. So we have no choice but to, in my judgment, I think I can say in our judgment, we have no choice but to ask the voters for permission to try and spread out the deficit over a period of time.
What is that actually going to look like though? Like for,
You mean in
for
terms
the
of what it will
taxpayer?
cost?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have rough numbers because we don't have the exact amount. We won't know the terms entirely until we have permission to go and negotiate it. But in rough terms, for someone who owns a $200,000 house, if we had to pay it off all at once in 1 year, that would mean an $1,100 hit if we were forced to do it this year. If it were amortized over 5 years, it would probably be $300 a year over 5 years. If it were amortized over 10 years, it would likely be in the neighborhood of $165 per year over 10 years. 15 years would drop it to about $135 per year, and 20 years would drop it to just over $100 per year. So you can figure up or down based on the value of property that you have.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
Jennifer Hawkins, resident. Question, you used the terminology that the council will not overspend their income this year. The question would be, are you considering this loan income?
So that's a good question. It's hard to make sure I'm choosing the right language. But let me be clear. At the moment, the payment on this loan is not yet figured in the current tax rate that has been set. So if the voters approve this measure, we will have to adjust the tax rate accordingly so that the loan will be, the tax rate will, I'm sorry.
Sure.
It's been a long day. You want to try, John?
We approved the budget. The rate hasn't been set yet. And the budget does not include payments on this. And this article and Article 5 really tie together, because Article 5 is resolving the issue for the current year budget, where, at least in my personal opinion, a substantial part of this problem results from the same issue that generated Article 5, which is that the payments that the state makes to subsidize property taxes through the rebates that are applied on the tax bill were effectively counted twice as income because they are part of the tax revenue, but then they were added on top of the tax revenue as if they were coming in a second time.
Since 2018-19.
Right. And if you add that up, that's well in excess of $1 million, maybe $1.2 million. It's the biggest part of it. And so those two tie together, and resolving that error going forward resolves the problem going forward, by assuming that it's set up correctly in the books going forward.
And what I was trying to say, not very artfully, is that the work that we still have to do, assuming this is approved, is for the city to go back and make sure that whatever payments we're making on this loan the rest of this year will be within our means. In other words, the commitment that we've made as a council is that we will not deficit spend in any instance. At the end of the year, we will not have deficit spend in our general fund or the sewer fund. And we're in the midst right now of trying to figure out exactly what that's going to look like. That's what the department heads are working on this month. Other questions? Okay, let's go on to the next one. Article 4, shall general obligation bonds or notes of the city of Newport, Vermont in an amount not to exceed $1 million be issued to refund a deficit in the sewer fund? So what's going on here is that over a period of years, there was significant deficit spending every year without raising the rates, the sewer rates, to cover the deficit spending. And therefore, we have an accumulated deficit that shows up on the balance sheet for the sewer fund in the line due to others. And what that means is it's due to the general fund. Effectively, the general fund of the city covered the deficit in the sewer fund. So this would pay off the sewer deficit that is owed to the general fund and basically allow us to pay the bills this year and spread the pain of the accumulated deficit out over the next 10 years. Go ahead.
Why wasn't it increased over time like it should have done?
I think it was a combination of factors. I think it had to do with a council that was that wasn't paying enough attention to the actual numbers over a period of years. That was part of it. I think COVID contributed because for a period of time, nobody wanted to talk about anything that might hit ratepayers significantly during the COVID years. So I think that contributed to it as well. I think that what we've uncovered over the last few months is that the bookkeeping itself has been foggy. And we're in the process right now of trying to simplify the chart of accounts, the general ledger, and the reporting. And we've instituted a practice of the council reviewing the financials every month with our financial advisor. So it's just a whole bunch of things that, there are a number of people who probably should have been on top of this, but I don't think any one person is fully responsible for it.
The single largest source of the shortfall really is that when the leachate contract with Casella ended, rates should have been raised at that point in time to offset the loss of that revenue. Because thanks to Casella, Newport had among the cheapest water and sewer rates in the state of Vermont. And those rates were carried as artificially low for, 7, 8 years? And
that was a loss of $185,000 the first year. And there was no adjustment then or thereafter to cover that lost revenue.
Yeah. And then other general fixed costs have gone up with no rate adjustment. So we're effectively paying the piper for having had ultra cheap subsidized rates for 7 years.
Larissa.
Hi, Larissa Hammond, Newport. Mr. Mayor, it seems that this administration is asking Newport taxpayers to foot the bill under previous administration's mismanagement. I think we've called it foggy and budgeting errors on NDD's page. When this administration has made no public effort, at least that I've been able to see, to pursue legal or financial accountability from those responsible for these errors. And after this vote, I just wanted to mention that you'll be leaving the city and handing the reins over temporarily to someone you recently censured and someone who campaigned on integrity. I just want to say I find this concerning. And that is just a comment that I'd like to make. That is the vibe, that is where I'm at, and just wanted to share that. So,
thank you. Appreciate your time. Are there other comments or questions? Go ahead, Scott.
Do we know what the rates will be after, let's say this is approved? Do we have an idea of what the rates will look like afterwards? Is it going to vary, or is it going to be consistent across the board? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a great question. The Water and Sewer Task Force is meeting at this point about every 2 weeks. One of the things that they're going to have to do is to adjust the rates again. We have the opportunity as water commissioners, the council act as water commissioners in this instance, they have the opportunity to adjust the rates every quarter. And we'll be paying a lot of attention to how the income looks for this most recent adjustment we did. So the next rate adjustment would have to be decided no later than October 30th, John, is that right?
Yes.
October 30th, in order to adjust it so that it would still impact the last 2 quarters of the year. So the short answer is no, we don't know that yet. We're watching really closely.
But will you know by October? I mean, when will we kind of have an idea of what the rates are going to be?
You want to say a word about that, John? I mean, I don't monopolize.
Well, we're going to be looking at the numbers in hopefully September and in October, because if the rates are going to be adjusted for the quarter beginning November 1, 2025, which would be billed in February 2026, that decision has to be made by the council no later than October 31 because of the lead time. The bills are always in arrears for the prior quarter, so any rate adjustment is prospective. So the bills that are coming out presently and the bills that will be issued in October are based on the last adjustment that we made. So it would be the January billing due in February where any further rate adjustment would first be seen in terms of the practical effect of paying it. But the rate, the formulas will be known by the end of October because the council has to vote on them.
Go ahead, Liz.
I have a question about the smell. I live on East Main, and I regularly walk from like around the Brown Cow down to Vista or downtown, or I take my bike, and I regularly smell like raw human feces when the wind is right. And I know it's not coming from the dump because I know the direction the wind is coming from. Would this address that issue?
No. I mean, so just so you know, I live across the street. I do smell it occasionally, and it's been particularly strong a couple of mornings the last week or so. I haven't had a chance to try and talk with Tom or Jason yet about what might be going on. When I did a tour a year ago of the plant and asked a question about that, what I was told was it's a question of tinkering with the chemical treatment and the processes, and that sometimes it gets out of whack and then fixed again. You know, they tinker with it and figure it out again. So I don't know about you, but my experience has been just like in the last week and a half or so, it's felt really strong. So it's on my mind, and at least one other person has written to the city about it. So we'll follow up. But no, I would say this has really nothing to do with the actual day-to-day operation of the plant at this point. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes?
Yeah, so once you get to the bottom of all the problems and the exact amounts and everything, are you planning to put a system of checks and balances in place for the future so this just can't happen again, like it should definitely not have happened in the past? It seems like major red flags should have gone up when over $1.x million was counted twice. I mean, that's just hard to believe.
So I'll lead, but anybody else can add. Yes, short answer is we're not waiting. We're actually trying to put those checks and balances in place now. The most important of which, in my judgment, is to simplify the financial statements so that anybody can read them and understand them. And we instituted about 3, maybe 4 meetings ago now that we have the financial consultant that we've hired from NEMRIC, the New England Municipal Resource Center, who's been working with us extensively for the last 5 months. And he's been coming to every council meeting and walking the council through initially the balance sheets. That's where he started, to make sure that we get the balance sheets straight. And you can learn a lot from them. And he's been teaching us how to read them effectively. And then this most recent meeting, for the first time, we had first time in, at least since I've been around, we had a description of the spending so far year to date against the budget. Right, so far we're 1 month into the year to date, and he actually walked us through where we are in terms of the budget, and is beginning to help the council have the tools to know how to say, well, wait a minute, why is that number what it is, and then learn how to go deeper. He's working on reports that are called header suppressed, or suppression of headers, headers only, suppression of all the other material, so that you can use you can see it in a few pages instead of the 80 or 85 page report that we were getting before, that everybody, including me, was getting lost in. So I think that's the most important thing. And then, the work of the task forces, I think, has been critical, to have task forces that are meeting openly started out every week, and now they're both meeting every week to 2 weeks. And those groups will continue for the foreseeable future to try and go deeper, and then to make thoughtful recommendations to the council about how to make next steps.
Is there more than one person responsible for the bottom line number? Several people have to agree that's the correct number?
Yes. Yes, including the fact that we just had the auditors here last week for better part of 4 days in person. We're told that they were given everything they need, and we expect to have an initial draft of the audit for 24-25, the fiscal year that just ended on June 30, by roughly the end of September, for a couple of days of October. So we'll have that to inform our thinking as we're working on the following year's budget as well. Go ahead, Lori.
I just want to say, again, from my position on the financial task force, and I can sort of speak for the water and sewer, because I do attend all those meetings too. We're working really hard to do exactly what you've asked, and starting with this whole budget thing that Chip is walking us through. And it's difficult for me to have people question, not tonight, I understand, but there are people that I've spoken with that have said, what are you doing? What are you doing? And this is exactly what we're doing. We're very transparent. You can watch them all. You can come on Friday afternoons and help us out. We can't, who's to say what's going to happen in 10 years, right? New administration, new whatever over the next 10 years. All we can do is put down the best thing that we can do moving forward. We can make lots of suggestions and pass that along in hopes that those that come after us will continue and learn from this process.
All right, so shouldn't that system they come up with checks and balances be put into the city charter so that everybody has to follow it in the future?
Pam and then Larissa.
They're already in the charter. The real question is why don't they follow? What happened was crazy, and there were a lot of questions asked along the way, but the questions never got answered because at that point it was far from a transparent system. And there's a block of 10 years where it was never okay to ask a question. It could get shot down in a variety of different planes. And even though it was abundantly clear, and if you look back at old videos, you can see that people were asking the right questions about the right accounting premises and getting blown off every time. So it was still there in the charter, but unless you have people who are willing to be transparent, and unless you have a council who are willing to develop a spine and say, this isn't going to happen again. But that's up to us as voters. We can't be sheep either.
Thank you, Pam. Larissa.
So I'm reading a series of financial missteps that go back at least a decade that contributed to the city's current financial condition. So this goes over many years. And my question is, are the people involved in financial missteps currently involved in the city decisions?
I don't think so. No.
No conflicts of interest?
Not to the best of my knowledge. I mean, in terms of folks who have been here, we have, I think Kevin's the only one who's on council currently who was serving during some of those years. I'll let you speak to that, Kevin. We don't have former council members involved in, I just want to make sure when I say this I'm correct. I don't think we have any formal council members involved in the task forces, right? On either finance or water and sewer. and no former city managers or other,
Mayors.
Depends on
No.
how former.
sorry, I'm sorry.
Depends on how former.
Oh, yeah, that's
I was
right.
on the council in the 80s.
A
so
very long time ago.
Perhaps is,
Thank you,
Well
Jennifer.
before.
That's why I was hesitating. I wanted to be sure I was not
Yeah.
misspeaking. No. Other comments or questions? Okay, we're not done. We'll do the last one, and then we'll just have any time for more general comments or questions again. Article 5, as John noted, this is tied to the same issue in Article 3. It's just that it's about this current budget year. Shall the voters approve a $220,000 increase to the amount to be raised by taxes to be added to the $5,267,700.20 that the budget that was approved by the city's 2025 annual meeting for the general operation, and to cover the liabilities of the city of Newport, Vermont, and authorize the city to assess a tax sufficient to provide funds for the same. So all we're really saying here is, if it becomes necessary in the course of the budget review that we're doing right now with the department heads to seek funding to cover this budget error, we're asking the voters for permission now to cover it so that we have enough time in the year to actually recover it and not deficit spend this year. And this is related to the very same thing that John referred to earlier. What took place is that since 2018-19, there was a line that was, it was considered revenue arriving from the state. In, I think, 2018-19, it was $100,000. It's gone up steadily every year, and this year it was $220,000. And every year we counted that as if it was additional revenue. But in fact, what it was a diversion of property taxes that had already been counted that went to the state, and then the state writes a check back to the city. It's called the municipal adjustment tax. And it should never have been counted as separate revenue. It was already counted in the property tax line. And we didn't discover it, honestly, until Chip began doing his deep dive into the balance sheets and figured out what was going on. So if you add that total up for the last 7 or 8 years, it comes to, up till this year, it comes to $1.29 million. So that's a big chunk of that $1.8 million that Article 3 is referring to. And then this year, we did it again. The budget approved by council and given to the voters included that $220,000 as if it was additional revenue, when in fact it's not additional revenue.
So the other point about it is that the actual expense budget that was voted on is not being raised by that amount.
Right.
Because what we actually voted on town meeting day was the expense budget of the $5,267,000, the figure here, $5,267,700.20 is the expense budget that was approved at town meeting day. That number is not changing. All that this article does is recognize that on the income side of the budget, there was an error presented. It doesn't change the expense side at all. It's not like we're asking for an extra $220,000 on top of the $5.2 million. We're simply correcting the income side error.
Yes. Go ahead, Melissa.
Just one quick question. So all of these accounting errors were just discovered within the last 5 months?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. That's when we started doing the deep dive, and that's when we discovered it. Go ahead, John.
You would be incorrect apropos of the water and sewer, because that was posted for a number of years.
It was obvious that there was a running deficit for a number of years. That's correct. But this is the first, it's only been since March 4th and the work of the 2 task forces and the council that we've tried to go deep enough to really explore what's going on underneath it and come up with, I mean, really, we got 2 challenges. We had to solve the short-term cash flow challenge, which was dramatic. And that's part of the answer to the question, why are we doing this now? Why don't we wait 6 months until we know more? The answer is we have a cash flow crisis that we have to manage. And then the second question is, how do we make sure that we don't fall back into this pattern again?
Another question, what costs are the city cutting?
That's the work that the department heads have been asked to go back and do a careful review of everything that was passed in the budget for this year, and to look and make sure, first of all, that there are no other errors or omissions, and then secondly, to look at wherever and however we can try and.
Have they completed that, or are the voters being asked to foot the bill before that work?
You are being asked to approve this loan, not a loan, this adjustment in the event that it becomes necessary as a matter of timing at this point. Go ahead.
It sounds like it's a just in case thing, like a backup. Do you need that money, or is this like a, if you need the money, then it's there kind of thing?
No, we know that if we don't do something, we'd either have to cut, I mean, on this issue alone, not thinking about anything else, right? Any of the other parts of the budget. If we don't do anything, we know we will come up $220,000 short at the end of the year, right? So in that sense, it's an immediate question.
Will that be a continuing issue, like next year?
No, because we wouldn't make the same error in budgeting again, right? We would budget knowing that error has been made in the past and not making it again.
So money's being spent currently, and it has been spent for the last decade, but we don't need to be spending it? It's not something that our city needs us to be using that money, investing in whatever it's been going
No, I think
for?
this goes back to what John was trying to say, which is that we're not actually asking to change the expense side of the budget here. What we're saying is that there was a miscalculation in the amount of income, the revenue, that was going to be brought in by the tax rate that the treasurer set on our behalf. And therefore, we have to either figure out how to cut $220,000 from the budget, or we have to raise the tax rate to make sure that we make that additional $220,000 this year.
Why don't we consider cutting?
I think that's what I'm trying to say, is we haven't given up on the possibility that there may be ways that we can do that. But we don't have enough information to make that choice right now. The staff is working for the month of August. They've all been given a transaction history of their spending, and they are creating worksheets that will show us exactly what goes into every line on the budget, and then we'll go through it line by line. We, the task force, will go through it line by line and try and work out whether there are any possibilities for where we could try and save some.
So if we vote yes on this, will there still be attempts made to cut the budget, and then whatever is left over goes into the general fund for future use?
I think I can answer the first half of your question. I'm not sure I can answer the second. But the first half answer is, over the next month, we will be doing a deep dive to make sure that we are not going to be deficit spending this year. If it becomes clear that there are ways that we could make back, by whatever cuts we might find in that budget and not have to borrow as much, yes, we will consider those. And I would expect that would be a council decision at that point. Assuming the voters approve this tomorrow, it would be the council that would make decisions about that.
Can I add on that, Rick?
Please.
So when I was campaigning, going around talking with constituents, my neighbors, one thing I heard time and time again is that taxes in Newport are sky high. What can you do? And now I'm on the financial task force, and I am part of a really brilliant team of folks, and we have been doing a lot of nitty-gritty work, and it's been basically a triage for the last 5 months now. Yeah, I'm not just being very clear. It's been dealing with one thing at a time pragmatically, and now we're at the point where we made it to zero. When we wrapped up the last fiscal year and entered this one, getting just to have our balance sheet at a zero was like a huge win. And that doesn't probably sound good, but it was. And we, as a council, bringing it back and having these conversations, having transparency, having a legible budget, or a balance sheet, excuse me, so we can actually trace and see where money is being spent. These are really large steps. I know it doesn't maybe seem like much. And a lot of the information that's going to this, not just the task force folks, but it's not done in a vacuum. We have been contacting and working with VLCT, our attorneys and lawyers, understanding our charter, understanding state statutes, and what are some alternatives that we have. And this is really the best we've got. And to proactively move forward and convert the short term to long term, this is why we have set out the way they are. This is not to say that when we do our deep dive that I'm going to just pretend that that's a good number and, you know, moving forward into the next year, we're just looking like, no. I made a promise to my neighbors and I'm going to look and see where we are at. And I also want to give a lot of hope to our new budget process, which will have a lot of community involvement. And I'm actually really looking forward to that because that's something I think where this input can actually be constructive and we can then model and reflect that in our city budget with a lot of transparency.
And there are actually a couple of fundamental issues that Newport City has that significantly affect the tax rate. One is that the city is relatively land poor. In terms of the total area of the city, it's much smaller than any of the surrounding towns, so there's less taxable real estate in that sense. The city is something like 7.5 or 8 square miles versus the typical town, which is 36 square miles. So there's less to tax. Number two, somewhere in the neighborhood of a quarter plus of the total property value in the city is tax exempt. So the other 3/4 of the property value bears the whole burden. And the third factor is that when you vote on the school budget at town meeting, you really have no idea what the tax rate is going to be because the education tax rate is actually set through a formula imposed by the state. The state actually tells us how much the education tax rate is. And voting down or cutting a local school budget under this system does not have the same effect as cutting the municipal side of the budget where there is a direct correlation with the tax rate. The control of the education tax rate is very, very limited and indirect. And there are towns that have actually had circumstances where they've cut their school budget and their school taxes have still gone up because of the way the state formula works. So we have no control over that whatsoever. So those all add complications to the process.
But what we have control over
Is the municipal side,
Yeah.
which is what the financial task force is focused on the general fund primarily, and the water and sewer task forces are focused on those funds. Those are the parts that we do have some control over.
I was just curious if the state provides you guys with any information, line item numbers of what the lottery revenues provide for the schools in the city of Newport.
I don't know.
The lottery money just goes into the general state education pot, and it just makes up part of what the state contributes to the schools. They don't break it down town by town.
How do you know you're getting your fair share? You just trust them blindly? Serious.
I hear you. I don't know. We haven't even asked that question at this stage. Honestly, at the moment, the focus is the municipal side where we have control and trying to figure out how to get ourselves out of the position we're in.
I understand that. I'm just seeing.
But your question is duly noted and worthwhile. So Mark, Larissa, and then Ann.
Yeah, so I live on a lake, so my taxes would go up, right?
Lake
My taxes
Road?
are 16,000 a year.
I don't know. We can't speculate, Mark, about what's going to happen. There's no way we could know that here. Go ahead, Larissa.
I just want to say, well, it's kind of funny we're joking about just trusting the state when I feel like we're being asked just to trust everyone here. And I think as a taxpayer and as someone with kids, a kid who's about to go off to college, inflation has hit our family very hard. And we are constantly shamed if we have to seek assistance from the state, whether it be for Dr. Dinosaur for our kids or, using the summer feeding program. We are constantly shamed by society for basically being reimbursed for the taxes we pay into the system. So I would just like to say that I don't feel comfortable moving forward on the budget and approving it without seeing what costs are going to be cut first. If I'm expected to live within a budget, so should the city. And that's just what I have to say.
Yeah, I appreciate your concern, and I don't disagree with your kind of global way of putting it, which is that just like households, the city should absolutely be living within its means. And we're doing our level best to figure out how to do that, having inherited an accumulated deficit that runs to several $1 million. So stay tuned, and you are welcome to be a part of the conversation as we do this deeper dive. That's the best I think we can offer in terms of transparency right now. But I don't disagree.
We also have the task force members, or several community members that have come together and put a lot of time and effort into taking the deep dives and looking at this stuff. So if anyone is interested, you can become a part of those task forces at any time. There's plenty of open doors, open chairs when there's meetings to join any of these task force at hand, because everybody's input is needed, and to sit in on any of these meetings is very educational and very informational. So I would encourage anyone to step forward and be willing to sit on a committee, come and join a meeting, and assist us, because you would know what we're up against as well. And it's not we, it's all of us, right? We're looking to solve a problem that has been ongoing and for years, and this is what we can do to help move us forward.
So I just want to be clear, the task forces meet at regular times, do my level best to keep up with them on the website, and we're going to have a new person in the office to help us do that shortly. And you can always come, and our practice has been in each of our task forces to fully include anyone who comes to be a part of them. So really, there's been almost no distinction between comments from the task force members themselves and folks who come just to observe and be a part of it.
So I just want to say this as a community member, not a member of the task force. Having lived here for 19 years, I want to agree with what Pam said. I sat in a lot of meetings where those people that asked the questions were pushed down. And I joined the task force because I really wanted to make a difference in that not happening ever again. And so please come, please be a voice. We're not sitting in a lofty tower. We are down and dirty, and we're going to get even dirtier to figure out which way we can go. But that's what it takes in a community like this. We're small enough, and we have to trust. At some point, we do need to trust each other that we can work together and move forward. And I appreciate the transparency that's happening now that I haven't seen in a really long time.
I should add one more thing in terms of checks and balances, and that is that one of the requirements of the line of credit that we're operating on, the cash line of credit this year that was approved by council and then arranged with Pasumsic Bank, is that we maintain the ongoing relationship with Chip Stearns from Nemrick for at least the foreseeable future, and which we were thrilled to be requested to do. And so Chip will continue to work with us throughout this year. And so far, the task force has been, both our task forces have been amazing. And I don't think we could have made anything like the progress we've made without Chip's help. Go ahead, Ann.
I just wanted to add a little something extra to what John was saying about why we are unique income-wise in bringing funds in or taxes in. We are also a little bit unique to places around us because we have our own police department, we have our own fire department cooperating with lots of other places. We have, the radio control room, which is unique in that it's ours, but we also do radio work, police radio work, dispatching for many other communities. And recreation, you know, a lot of communities look to Newport as a sort of hub, a place to go. You know, if there's going to be a dance or if there's going to be something happening in the winter, activities, parades. I'm not saying other communities don't do it, but we do it more. And so our expenses, you might say, should be looked at, but we have bigger expenses than some other communities because we do more.
The ambulance, too. The ambulance.
Pardon?
And the ambulance. The ambulance.
Any other questions about Article 5 in particular, or any other global comments or questions about the whole thing?
Eileen Drew, Newport. It's not a question, but just an observation. It would seem that if Newport could attract more businesses paying taxes, that would greatly solve our problem in revenue for the city. But it seems like more businesses are closing than coming here. And I know people have been working on trying to generate more businesses coming in. Is there, and can anybody shed any light on why we're having trouble attracting?
You attract them with tax breaks.
So that's a piece of it.
And we can't do that.
Hold on just a second, Melissa. I will say that the previous city council in December passed a long-term, an economic development strategy for Newport that's available. You can read it. It's quite interesting reading, in my judgment. And the first step in that process would be to set the city up to be a partner in public-private partnerships. The question is, why hasn't somebody bought the property across the street here and built on it in the last decade? It's been available for the better part of 9 years, right? So why hasn't it happened yet? And the answer is that we're not unlike any other community. We're similar to all other communities, which is that right now it's next to impossible to get the numbers to pencil for developers. And so the way things are getting built in communities across the state and around the country is in public-private partnership, where the city takes on some responsibility for trying to get infrastructure built for the public good that will then create a situation in which the developer can make that development happen. So just to give you two examples, if we wanted to build, housing and commercial across the street, it would likely require a new sewer main down the middle of Main Street, and we would need a place to park. So it would probably require to create some kind of a public parking facility upon which you would then have a pedestal upon which to build a building that would go up for the housing and the commercial properties that are needed. So one of the things that we've been so concerned about as a council is how do we make sure we get our financial house in order and show that we can be fiscally responsible, so that when it comes time, a year or 2 years down the road, to ask the voters, can we extend ourselves to do this public works project in order to make sure that that kind of development can happen, that we can show ourselves, we will have shown ourselves by that time, I hope, to be trustworthy and to gain the public's trust in that. But it's a step-by-step process to get ready for those things. It doesn't happen overnight. But if you want to read it, it's available on both the city website and Newport Downtown Development, and it makes for very interesting reading. It calls for 410 new units of housing to be built between here and the Maple Fields down Main Street and out to East Side. It calls for a new community rec facility to be put into play. It calls for a new hotel on the waterfront. So there's lots of thinking going into those things. Larissa.
I just wanted to say something that is limiting are like locations for self-employed or like cottage industry people. So we actually work with Amy at the Witch's Brew and have kind of a little collective of indie makers, small business owners, but we all pitch in to pay the rent because the rent on Main is kind of astronomical, considering the fact that for much of the year, we have zero foot traffic. During the summer, we get some foot traffic, but Newport doesn't have a lot of people here. So it really does make it limiting, especially if you're a startup, to get a place on Main. So I think we have like Gossip Girl closed, and who had the money to come in there and remodel it? I think it's an insurance agency. So if we want
A legal office.
or a legal office, thank you. So I mean, like if we want to be unique and like foster unique products, unique artworks, like all that kind of stuff, like we need to be able to support indie makers, and that's just at least our, we've been here a few years, and I will say a lot of our foot traffic that would be from here came actually from Quebec, like at festivals and things, and not slowed down. Do you have anything? That's all I have to say really, is it's a very small community. There's just not a lot of people here. So it's, unless you're someone like Walmart, you know, like and have a mega chain, it doesn't make sense. It almost makes more sense to go further south where you're getting people coming up from New York and other places. So.
Today I just went to Vermont Community Rural Development. They put on a summit every year. And so all across the state, people get together, share ideas, what are the commonalities. Went to a breakout session about community trusts, and hearing from, well, in our region, Lunenburg spoke a lot about that process. But it was basically another way to revitalize decrepit buildings, because they're decrepit buildings. There's a, what's the IRS term? There's like, I just learned about it. Wait, getting a minute. Combating community deterioration. And so there's a way underneath the nonprofit umbrella to develop a trust, which is non-governmental, but you would definitely work in partnership, at least like obviously keeping the city informed, but that way you can revitalize buildings that are currently sitting empty. And the issue that I'm hearing is true, which is the rent, and so that helps subsidize that. So one community way down south, they were talking about how unfortunately it's gone too well, because they basically took a building that was formerly their country store, but as we know, country stores are kind of a hard business model when you have a small population, and there's competitors now in town. And anyways, 15, okay, but it takes years. That's the reality. That's what they're like, just keep at it, keep going. About 15 years later, now the folks are actually making money because they've expanded and turned it into like a catering business. And anyways, there's alternatives, and I hope that if you're listening, you probably give a hoot. And there are other ways besides the city helping, but I think there's also moving forward, just as Rick said, correcting our books, moving forward, being pretty level, would help entice developers to come and trust Newport with that. So yeah, that's just one idea. I'm mostly just putting it out there, you know, if you want to start the community trust, that'd be cool.
Go ahead, Scott.
Just going back to, I'm just trying to get through this.
Yeah, please.
And look at details. So these adjustments that are being proposed to increase the tax rate on water, sewer, and property tax, it looks like this is, for the most part, to cover these like these bridge loans, as in once we get over this hurdle of paying these old debts off. Are these tax rates going to be permanent, or do we have a plan to assess this once the books of the city are like, we paid off our debts, we've got a competent fiscal policy, we're making sure we're not falling back into this? Is there a plan to once again assess those rates, maybe go back to, I know we talked about how water rates here are, water and sewer were much lower than our neighbors and stuff. So does that mean that in the future those rates will reflect I guess what I'm asking is, are these rates going to be permanent, or do we have a plan to maybe adjust those in the future?
So the adjustment would happen every year in the budgeting process. And so one question is, how do we create a budgeting process that is more transparent and more engaging of the community? And so that's part of what the finance team has been looking at. And we'll be coming back to the council and the community with some concrete proposals about how to bring a far greater level of transparency to that process. Having said that, I'll just say my experience is that if it's not this, there will always be things. I mean, the sewer treatment facility is, what, 40 years old at this point? You know, there will always be capital expense and improvement. For sure. What I do hope we can get to is the point where we are not living constantly. Every new capital purchase right now is a loan. So we're paying more every time we buy a police car, a fire truck, you know, and any capital expenditure right now is being done on credit. And what I can tell you is that my personal commitment, just like in our home budgets, is to get out of that bind as much as possible because it makes everything far, far more expensive. That's the goal.
And if I can just add to that, so as it was said earlier, we had to get to a zero at the end of end of June, because we had a $1.8 million line of credit to pay back to Assumption. In order to do that, we basically wiped out funds that had been set aside for things like a $600,000 Vector truck and things that we thought were being saved for over the years. And in fact, I believe the number Tom thought that there was close to maybe $400,000 saved for this truck that needs to be replaced.
Actually, it was 160.
When in all
the total number.
Right. When in all actuality, it was much less than what he had thought, just because things were not in the right places. So. Well,
in actuality, just to be clear about this, it was zero. Even though we had a bank account that had $160,000 set aside to go toward the eventual purchase of a $600,000 Vector truck, it didn't matter because the city itself was in arrears far, far more than that amount of money, right? So it's like saying, I have a special account where I'm saving money for a new car over here, it's got $2,000 in it, while I owe $500,000 on the other hand, right? It's not a real number. So basically what we had to do this spring and early summer with Chip's help was to identify all of those things, pull the obligations that hadn't been honored out, get all of that cash into one account, and when we consolidated it, it was just enough basically to get us to zero and pay off the line of credit from last year. And that's what allowed us to kind of start with a clean slate for this year. It's been challenging news. Every week, I feel like, or certainly every couple of weeks, I feel like we've been surprised by more information. But I do feel like I suspect we're getting toward the end of it at this point. The balance sheet work is largely done. And that's where we were finding these significant issues. Pam?
One of the questions I've been asked several times is, this city has insurance. It must have an insurance policy. And why doesn't that include some liability for, and I'm going to use the word incompetence, which is what had to have happened for us to be in the state that we're in. Because we not only overspent, we wiped out all the surplus that we had across the board. That's ridiculous. So there was certainly incompetence. I'm not saying that there was embezzlement, but there was incompetence, no question. We do have an insurance policy. I've asked, we know there is one. Why can't we use that?
The initial answer I've gotten is that it would mean we would have to prosecute. We would have to go after those folks. And you're talking about years of litigation and high expense to do it. So I'll just say, you know, it's not a closed conversation. I suppose it could happen.
Have you spoken to the LCT?
I've had one initial conversation that I would not call conclusive. It was just an initial probe.
Is that worth having another conversation?
Possibly, but it's not. I mean, it's no secret, y'all. I have made no secret of the fact that I don't think it's a winning strategy for this city to spend a bundle of money and years of litigation to try and go after that. That's my...
That may be true, but it may be more simple than that. It's still worth asking the questions.
Fair enough.
And I feel once we get a more detailed understanding of our budget and our history and how that's what the task force is right now deciding. So think it's a lot of hearsay to just make, or even go down that route when we don't have a clear picture. So I would like, again, when it becomes apparent and it's worth our time, but this is, again, a time-sensitive issue. And if in 5 years from now, we get some benefit, cool, then that will but right now, these issues and these things need to be taken care of.
I get that. However, this is not hearsay. Those of us who have attended meetings for years know perfectly well it is not hearsay.
I'm more than happy to ask a deeper set of questions. Larissa.
Your question, Pam, got me thinking, and then Carter's response. Why is time of the essence for this ballot measure if we don't have all the facts? Why don't we do some further investigating into seeing if it would actually, like Pam mentioned, be like, maybe it is a simple problem, maybe it won't be. Like, I just feel like more work should be done on the city side. It's easier to be like, hey, we've got all this stuff going on, we need the taxpayers to put this short-term loan now. That is definitely, I think that is the path of least resistance, but I don't think I think it's worth investigating all possible avenues before asking us to vote, because it kind of feels like we're in this double bind, and I feel like that's almost, it just doesn't feel right in my body.
It doesn't feel great to me either. So I'll just say, the short answer is, the piece that you're missing in the equation is that we don't have any money. We can't operate right now. If we don't get permission to do these loans, the city does not have enough cash to operate on a day-to-day basis. That's the problem. We have to make some initial, immediate decisions to buy us some time and to spread the pain of the accumulated deficit out over some time for the taxpayers. And then we absolutely need to go deeper and ask all the questions that all of you and all of us have been asking tonight and for the last several months. But the problem is, we don't have the luxury of waiting 6 months to a year while we try and sort it all out. We have a cash flow problem.
So if they don't pass, what would happen then?
If they don't pass, it depends on which one. If item number 1 doesn't pass, it means that when we pay the $870,000 roughly bill for the fire truck, we're going to have to find $70,000 in cuts from the city somewhere. If we've already got the approval for the $800,000, we're going to borrow that money. If the water tower line doesn't pass, we really are in trouble, because the charter forbids us from extending that loan without voter approval, and we have no way to pay off the $2.4 million line of credit, construction line of credit note, to bridge us until we get to the Vermont Bond Bank. On item 3, the $1.8 million for the general fund, the council agreed to a provision when we took our cash flow line of credit for this year with Pasumsic, that the entire amount of that will be immediately applied to the principal on that cash flow line of credit. So we will not be, it will bring down the level of interest that we're paying for the rest of the year on that operating line of credit. Effectively, it's going into our operations by paying off the line of credit. On the sewer, the due to others line, the $1 million in the sewer due to others category, is going to provide us with $1 million that will help the city pay its bills for the next several months until the first round of property taxes come in. Because we don't get property tax coming in until late October, November. And then finally, this last one, if this one doesn't pass, it means that we'll have to go, we'll have to see where in the world we might be able to cut expenses to the tune of another $220,000 in the budget. And the commitment is to look at that set of questions regardless. What we're trying to do is be responsible and be prepared so that if we don't have options, we have a way to deal with it.
So will you be pursuing also more information around the city insurance? Because the city pays for the insurance, correct? Does the city still pay for this insurance?
Yes, the insurance is through Taxes, which is VLCT, which is the folks that we're having. They're like a kind of partner group, and that's the folks that will continue to have conversations with.
I just think if the taxpayer is paying for the insurance, I personally think it's definitely worth the conversation, probably not seeing what kind of claims or...
Noted. Yep, heard it loud and clear. We'll follow up.
So it seems to me that if Article 5 passes, then you have a lot less pressure with cuts.
I suppose it's true. If the voters do not approve it tomorrow, it means that we don't have any choice. We've got to go force those cuts. Absolutely. I can tell you that we are looking for the cuts wherever we can find them anyway. An awful lot of the city's budget is bound by contracts that we don't have any current control over. Union contracts for police department employees and union contracts for public works employees being chief among them. So those things are fixed at the moment. There will be a new round of negotiation coming up, but that's not going to take effect until at least a year from now. I think, it's true. Let me just say, it's true that the council is asking the community to trust that we are doing our level best to go as deep as we possibly can, as thoughtfully and carefully as we possibly can. So yes, we are asking the folks in the community to trust that we're doing that as quickly as we can. And also, I think that it's true that the council is being as responsible as it can be by saying we are trying to anticipate what's going to happen next with these articles so that we have a way to try and dig ourselves out of the hole that we're in. And finally, I'll just say about that, transparency is everything. That's why everything we've done is on tape. God bless Pam Lads and NEK-TV, right? Like if you want to know the detail of what these task forces are talking about, it is easy to go read. Well, it's not. It takes endurance, but it is possible to go and watch them. And even if you can't make it here at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon or 6:30 on a Thursday night for one of those meetings, you can catch up, and then you can come to council meetings where we have had, I think, a pretty high standard for engagement from folks in the community to share what they're concerned about.
And I would add that transparency is a nice, great word that is always something we should strive for as a public agency or government. But I think legibility is something that goes in hand with transparency. So we've been showing you that 100-page, budget and what's going in and out, but there was no way to actually track it and understand it. It's technically public record. But now we're actually asking questions, getting the right set of sheets of paper that can be simplified and distilled, and so it's understandable. So that way it's easily shareable. That way you can have conversations with your neighbors about it. I've never talked with my neighbors about that packet beforehand, but now, boy, am I, which is good. But that's part of it. It's part of the learning that we are doing as a council as a relatively fresh board, is we're asking questions, we're seeking guidance from those that are really informed, and also involving the community members to have input through these task force. So I would end by seating. It's a rolling basis, so come and join us anytime. Yeah, we've been working for a minute, but.
Unrelated to anything. We had 2 people online for Chris Vachon.
Speak up a little bit, it's hard to hear.
We had 2 people online, Chris Vachon.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, can you just stop sharing and just...
I wondered if they would have any questions.
That's a great question, Kevin, thank you. Anybody still out there? Chris and Joseph, any comments or questions you want to make?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, sure can. Thanks, Chris.
The past 5 months, I've been watching you guys from the sidelines, from my comfy couches to those council chairs, but it's been refreshing to see the amount of work that's been happening, and I find that the word transparency is not a dirty word anymore. It's actually what's happening. Unfortunately, this circumstance has happened over basically a decade, and things have not been readjusted as needed. But it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's nice to see a council willing to make that difficult push of we need to get more money in.
Thank you, Chris. Any final comments or questions before we all let ourselves go home? Jean?
I think that attending under prior administration and this administration, is a complete 180 in a positive direction. And I think that you guys will get what you want eventually when the public trusts you and your transparency. And I feel great selection.
Thank you, Jean.
And I trust you guys. So
Seems like a good place to end. I'll just make that an invitation for everybody in the room and anybody who may watch this. If you'd like to be more involved, there's room for the community to be involved in the process. So let us know how what you're most interested in, and we'll find a way to put you to work, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no other comment from council, any final comments?
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is just a notice that I am going to take a vacation tomorrow, come hell or high water. I'm going to be over on the coast of Maine. I will be available, and I will be present for the council meeting next week, but Kevin will be moderating that meeting, facilitating that meeting for us, and Kevin will be available to sign any AP warrants that are needed in the next week or so. And I don't think there's anything else we'll need to talk about that. Oh, one other thing is, I'm going to work with Andrew this week to figure out how to get the agenda and packet posted in a timely fashion this weekend. So I expect Andrew will be in the city manager office trying to sort through that with me coaching him from afar. So, okay. The next meetings of the council, well, first there's a special town meeting tomorrow, if y'all haven't heard. 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Please come and vote. Please remind your neighbors to come and vote. It's pretty important that we take responsibility for this together and figure out what we want to do next, one way or the other, however these ballot measures go tomorrow. And then there will be a regular city council meeting next week, August 18th, here at 6 p.m. Do I have a motion to approve those next two meetings?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
I got a motion from Carter and a second from Kevin. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're out the door in an hour and 25 minutes. Way better than last meeting, everybody.